While I was deployed overseas serving my country, my wife convinced my elderly mother to change our family trust. My name is Cameron Holt. 37 years old and 17 years in the United States Army as a communications officer. I'd spent the last 9 months in a forward operating base, coordinating intel transmissions and dreaming about Kentucky bluegrass. 3 days after I landed back in Lexington, I found the papers in my mother's desk drawer. The family trust my father had established before his death. Altered. Not just altered. Completely restructured with Marissa, my wife of 8 years, listed as the primary trustee. My mother, Evelyn, had been moved to secondary beneficiary status. The document was dated 4 months into my deployment. I sat in my childhood home study, holding the papers, reading each line twice. The house had been in our family for 3 generations. The land it sat on, 15 acres of the most beautiful countryside in Kentucky, was meant to stay in the family name forever. That was what my father had wanted. "Everything okay in here?" Marissa appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame in that casual way of hers. Her blonde hair was tied back, and she wore the diamond earrings I'd sent her for our anniversary 2 years back. I slid the papers back into the folder. "Just going through some things. Your mom's finances were a mess," she said, voice light and helpful. "I organized everything while you were gone. Someone had to step in." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "I've been paying all her bills, handling the property taxes," Marissa continued. "The trust needed updating. Your mother agreed completely." My mother sat in the living room watching a game show with the volume too loud. 82 years old and starting to repeat herself more often. The last few video calls I'd had with her from overseas, she'd seemed confused about what day it was. "Thanks for keeping things organized," I said finally. "I need a little time to adjust to being home." Marissa smiled. "Of course, take all the time you need." That night I sat on the back porch long after Marissa had gone to bed. I watched the silhouettes of old oak trees against the night sky and thought about what my father would have done. A career military man himself, he'd taught me that the loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. The next morning, I kissed Marissa goodbye as she left for her job at Sundale Financial. I told her I was going to spend the day with Mom. She didn't see me slip the trust documents into my jacket pocket. I met Marissa 10 years ago at a coffee shop near Fort Campbell when I was stationed there. She was sharp, ambitious, and had a way of making people feel special. We were married within a year. She got along well with my mother from the start, something I was grateful for, especially after my father passed away 5 years ago. Dad had been the responsible one, the planner. When he was diagnosed with lung cancer, he made sure everything was in order. "Take care of your mother," he told me on his last day. "The house and land stay in the family. That's non-negotiable." The trust he set up was ironclad, or so I thought. For years, Marissa had complained about living in a rental while sitting on all that land at my mother's place. We could build our own house there, she'd suggested multiple times. I always refused. The property was meant for my mother to live out her days in peace. My deployments had become more frequent the past 3 years. Each time I returned, I noticed small changes. My mother seemed more dependent on Marissa. My wife had taken over her checkbook, her medication schedule, her doctor's appointments. "She's getting forgetful," Marissa would tell me. "She needs the help, Cameron." It made sense, until it didn't. On my second day back home, I took my mother to lunch alone, just the 2 of us. We went to Bellamy's, the small diner she and Dad used to frequent every Sunday after church. "How are you really doing, Mom?" I asked after we ordered. She smiled, her hands slightly trembling as she sipped her water. "Oh, getting by. Marissa has been so helpful." "I saw the trust was changed," I said, keeping my voice even. She looked confused. "Was it?" "The papers you signed a few months back, about the house and the property." Mom frowned. "Marissa brings me so many papers to sign, bills and such. She explains them, but..." She trailed off. "I get mixed up sometimes." My stomach tightened. "What kind of papers?" "Insurance, bank things. She says it's to protect the assets while you're away. that you'd want her to handle the finances. Mom leaned forward. Did I do something wrong, Cameron? I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. No, Mom, you didn't do anything wrong. On the drive home, Mom fell asleep in the passenger seat. I made a phone call to an old Army buddy who'd become an attorney. I kept my voice low as I explained the situation. Don't confront her yet, he advised. We need to see how far this goes. 3 days later, I found the bank statements. I hadn't been looking for them specifically. I was in my mother's bedroom, helping her sort through old photographs when she mentioned wanting to show me the nice statement Marissa had brought over. What statement is that, Mom? From the bank. She said the investments were doing well. I found the folder in her nightstand. Inside were statements from 3 different accounts I'd never seen before. 2 were recently opened joint accounts between Marissa and my mother, with withdrawal privileges for Marissa. The 3rd was a brokerage account where the family's long-term investments, nearly $400,000 my father had built up over decades, had been transferred. My hands went cold as I flipped through the pages. There it was, in black and white. $78,000 withdrawn over the past 6 months. Money that had disappeared in increments of $5,000 to $15,000 at a time. The withdrawal slips all bore my mother's shaky signature. I sat on the edge of the bed, papers spread around me like evidence at a crime scene. This wasn't opportunism. This was methodical, planned. My mother stood in the doorway watching me with concerned eyes. Are the numbers good? Marissa says not to worry about the details. I gathered the statements carefully and smiled at her. Everything's fine, Mom. I'm just catching up. That night, Marissa suggested we go out to dinner to celebrate my return. We went to an upscale restaurant downtown where she ordered champagne. She wore a new dress I hadn't seen before and jewelry that looked expensive. You seem distracted, she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. Still adjusting? I nodded, just getting my bearings. I've been thinking, she continued, eyes bright with excitement. Now that you're home, we should talk about building on your mother's land. I've already spoken with an architect, just preliminary discussions. I took a sip of water. And what would happen to Mom? We'd take care of her, of course, but that house is too big for her now. There's a lovely assisted living community near my office. Very exclusive. That's when I knew. The trust, the accounts, the land, it had all been a calculated move. She'd been planning this for years, waiting for the right moment when I was far away and my mother was at her most vulnerable. I didn't confront her, didn't raise my voice. I smiled and nodded in all the right places as she described her vision for our future home on my family's land. I think I need a few weeks to decompress, I told her. Get back into civilian rhythm before making any big decisions. She looked disappointed, but nodded. Of course, take your time. I excused myself to the restroom and called my attorney friend from the hallway. I need everything you've got on elder financial abuse and trust invalidation, I whispered. And I need it yesterday. Walking back to the table, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The weight of betrayal was heavy, but clarity had a way of focusing the mind. 1 week after my discovery, I scheduled an appointment with Harold Lerner, an estate attorney in Louisville who specialized in elder law. I drove the 60 miles alone, telling Marissa I was meeting with old Army buddies. Your mother was likely coerced, Harold said after reviewing the documents. His office was lined with law books and smelled of leather and wood polish. But proving it won't be simple. Did she have a cognitive assessment around the time these documents were signed? Not that I know of. I leaned forward in my chair. But she's been forgetting things. Names, dates. She repeats questions. Harold nodded. We'll need a geriatric specialist to evaluate her current condition. If she's showing signs of cognitive decline now, we can argue it was present when she signed. I left his office with a plan. The next day, I took my mother to Dr. Eleanor Jenkins, who confirmed what I suspected. Early-stage dementia, likely developing over the past year or more. Has anyone else noticed these symptoms? Dr. Jenkins asked. My wife, I replied. She's been handling my mother's affairs while I was deployed. Dr. Jenkins frowned slightly. And she never sought medical evaluation? Apparently not. Armed with medical documentation, I decided to approach Marissa directly, not with accusations, but with questions. We sat in the kitchen that evening after my mother had gone to bed. "I took Mom to see a specialist today," I began. "She's showing signs of dementia." Marissa's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "That's awful, but not surprising. I've noticed her memory issues for some time. Before or after she signed the trust amendment?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you implying, Cameron?" "Just trying to establish a timeline," I said, keeping my voice level. "For the doctors." "I've done nothing but help your mother while you were gone," she said, voice rising slightly. "Who do you think has been here day after day? Certainly not you." I nodded. "You're right, and I appreciate everything you've done. I'm just concerned about some financial decisions that were made." "What financial decisions?" Her tone sharpened. "The trust amendments, the new joint accounts, the withdrawals. Those were for your mother's care," she snapped. "And household expenses, everything is documented." "I'd like to see those documents." Marissa stood abruptly. "I don't appreciate being interrogated, Cameron. Not after everything I've sacrificed. Your mother agreed to all of it." "A woman with dementia," I said quietly. "She wasn't diagnosed then." Marissa grabbed her keys from the counter. "I need some air. We'll discuss this when you're thinking more clearly." She left, the door slamming behind her. I sat alone in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the old house settle around me. The next morning, I received a call from my bank. There had been an attempt to access my personal savings account, an account Marissa's name wasn't on. The attempt had failed due to incorrect password entries. That same afternoon, I found a certified letter addressed to my mother. It was from Cornerstone Assisted Living, confirming her upcoming residency. The move-in date was scheduled for the following month. The contract bore my mother's signature, dated 3 days after I had returned home. When I showed my mother the letter, she looked bewildered. "I don't remember this place. Did I agree to move?" "Marissa says you did," I replied, watching her face. She shook her head slowly. "I don't want to leave my home, Cameron. I promised your father I'd stay here." That night, I changed the passwords on all my accounts and placed a security freeze on my credit. Then I called Harold Lerner again. "It's worse than we thought," I told him, "and I think she knows I'm onto her." 2 days after confronting Marissa, I drove to the county clerk's office. I needed to see the original trust amendment for myself. Not the copy Marissa had in the house, but the official recorded document. The clerk, a silver-haired woman named Gladys, pulled the file for me. "Holt Family Trust," she confirmed, sliding the folder across the counter. I opened it and immediately saw something that made my blood run cold. The notary stamp. The document had been notarized by someone named Lauren Davis. "Do you know this notary?" I asked Gladys. She adjusted her glasses and looked at the stamp. "Lauren, of course. She's worked in the Westbrook Law Office for years." Westbrook Law. The same firm where Marissa's college roommate, Vanessa Westbrook, was a partner. A connection Marissa had never mentioned when discussing the trust changes. I thanked Gladys and drove straight to Westbrook Law. The receptionist informed me that Vanessa was in court, but I could speak with her associate, Lauren Davis. Lauren appeared nervous when I introduced myself. "You're Marissa's husband," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Is there something I can help you with? You notarized a trust amendment for my mother 6 months ago." She nodded. "I did. Everything was in order." "Was my mother alone when she signed the document?" Lauren hesitated. "I don't recall specifically." "Let me help you recall," I said quietly. "Was my wife present during the signing?" "I really can't discuss." "My mother has dementia, Lauren. Documented dementia. The amendment stripped her of primary control of assets she's held for decades, and somehow, it all happened while I was deployed overseas." Her face paled. "Mr. Holt, I think you should speak with Vanessa about this." "I intend to. But first I'd like to know if you actually witnessed my mother sign those papers, or if you just stamped a document Marissa brought to you." She stood abruptly. "I think this conversation is over." That evening, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Vanessa Westbrook. "Cameron," she said, her voice tense. "We need to talk." We met at a quiet cafe downtown. Vanessa looked immaculate in her business suit, but her eyes were troubled. "Lauren told me about your visit," she began. "I want to be clear that my firm takes notary standards very seriously." "Did your firm draft the trust amendment?" I asked. She sighed. "No." Marissa brought the document already prepared. She said it had been drafted by your family attorney with your knowledge. "And my mother? Was she present when it was notarized?" Vanessa looked down at her coffee. "No." Marissa explained that your mother was ill and couldn't come in. Lauren notarized it based on Marissa's assurance that your mother had signed it willingly. "That's illegal," I said flatly. "It is." Vanessa met my eyes. "And I've already contacted the State Bar Association to self-report the violation. Lauren has been suspended pending investigation." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've known Marissa since college, and I never thought she'd—" She trailed off. "There's more, Cameron. Last year she asked me about liquidating property assets and transferring funds offshore. I assumed it was for a client of her financial firm. Now I'm not so sure." My mind raced. Offshore accounts, property liquidation, the assisted living contract. How long has she been planning this? I wondered aloud. Vanessa hesitated. "There's one more thing you should know. 3 years ago, Marissa consulted me about divorce proceedings. She wanted to know how military pensions and benefits were divided, whether deployments affected spousal support calculations. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. 3 years ago, right around when my deployment schedule had intensified. "Thank you for your honesty," I said finally. As I left the cafe, I called Harold Lerner again. "I need to move quickly," I told him. "She's been working on this for years." I didn't confront Marissa with what I'd learned. Instead, I smiled through dinner that night as she talked about renovations she wanted to make to the house. I listened as she suggested selling some of the land to fund Mom's care. I nodded when she mentioned meeting with a financial advisor to streamline our investments. Meanwhile, I was building my case. Dr. Jenkins provided a detailed report on my mother's cognitive state, including her professional opinion that the symptoms had been developing for at least 18 months. Harold Lerner filed emergency motions to freeze all assets in the trust and the joint accounts Marissa had established. I hired a private investigator who documented Marissa's spending patterns. The designer clothes, the lunches with real estate developers, the meetings with a luxury home builder. He also uncovered something I hadn't expected: a separate apartment in Louisville, leased 6 months ago under her maiden name, Donovan. 10 days into my investigation, Harold called with news. "The judge has granted our request for temporary guardianship of your mother," he said. "And we've secured a hearing date for next week to contest the trust amendment." That same day, I moved all of my personal possessions from the master bedroom into the guest room. When Marissa questioned me, I blamed sleeping problems from the deployment. "I thrash around too much," I explained. "Don't want to disturb you." The truth was I couldn't stomach sleeping beside her anymore. 3 days before the hearing, I received a package from the private investigator. Inside was a flash drive containing financial records Marissa had tried to delete from her laptop. Records showing transfers from my mother's accounts to pay off Marissa's personal credit card debt. Over $40,000 gone in 6 months. That evening, Marissa approached me in the kitchen. "We need to talk about your mother," she said, voice gentle but firm. "The assisted living facility needs an answer by Friday." I looked up from my coffee. "I'm not sure that's the right move for her." Marissa sighed dramatically. "Cameron, be realistic. She can't live alone anymore, and we can't properly care for someone with dementia. We've managed so far." "That's because I've been handling everything," she said, irritation edging into her voice. "But it's not sustainable. The facility is top-notch, and the trust will cover the costs." "The trust," I repeated. "The one you had her sign while I was deployed." Something flashed in her eyes, wariness perhaps. Then it was gone, replaced by practiced concern. I did what needed to be done. Someone had to step up and make these decisions. I appreciate that, I said, my voice neutral. But I'd like to explore other options before moving her. Marissa's smile tightened. The deposit is non-refundable after Friday. You made a deposit already? Of course. Good places have waiting lists. I put down $15,000 to secure her spot. She touched my arm. From her account, not ours. Don't worry. I nodded, filing away this new information. Let me think about it overnight. The next morning, I drove to the assisted living facility myself. The director confirmed the deposit, but seemed confused when I asked about the waiting list. We don't currently have a waiting list, she told me. We have several units available immediately. When I asked about the deposit amount, she checked her records. It shows $5,000 here, she said, paid by Marissa Donovan, and $10,000 unaccounted for. Another piece of the puzzle. That afternoon, I finalized the last details with Harold. All evidence was compiled, all paperwork filed. The forensic accountant had completed her analysis of the financial records. Tomorrow was the hearing. I hadn't told Marissa about it. She would find out when the sheriff's deputy served her with papers in the morning. That night, I sat on the back porch again, looking at the old oak trees my father had loved. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. When the sheriff's deputy knocked on our door at 7 a.m., Marissa was still in her bathrobe. I watched from the kitchen doorway as she accepted the papers, her face transitioning from confusion to shock as she read them. "What is this?" she demanded, turning to me. "A court hearing? Today?" "To invalidate the trust amendment," I said calmly, "and to address the financial irregularities." "Financial—" She stopped, her face flushing. "This is ridiculous. I've done nothing wrong." "The hearing is at 10 a.m., I continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Judge Harriman's courtroom. You should probably call your attorney." She stared at me, the papers trembling in her hand. "You've been planning this all this time, pretending everything was fine." "Learned from the best," I replied. We arrived separately at the courthouse. Marissa with a hastily assembled legal team from her firm. Me with Harold Lerner and my mother, who sat beside me looking small but determined. Judge Elaine Harriman, a stern woman in her 60s, wasted no time. "This is a hearing to determine the validity of amendments made to the Holt Family Trust," she began. For the next 2 hours, Harold methodically presented our case. Dr. Jenkins testified about my mother's cognitive state. The forensic accountant detailed the suspicious transfers. Vanessa Westbrook confirmed the improper notarization. The private investigator presented evidence of the secret apartment and the discrepancies in the assisted living deposit. Throughout it all, Marissa sat rigid, whispering frantically to her attorneys. When it was her turn to testify, she attempted to paint herself as the devoted caretaker, stepping in when no one else would. "I've sacrificed my own career advancement to care for my mother-in-law," she insisted. "Every financial decision was made with her best interests at heart." That's when Harold produced the smoking gun, recorded conversations between Marissa and various real estate developers, discussing development plans for her property once the old woman is moved out. Judge Harriman's face hardened as she listened to Marissa's voice, clear and calculating, planning to profit from my family's land. Judge Harriman's ruling was decisive and comprehensive. "The court finds clear and convincing evidence that Evelyn Holt was not competent to execute the trust amendment," she declared. "Further, there is substantial evidence of undue influence and financial exploitation by Marissa Holt. She ordered the trust restored to its original form, with additional provisions barring Marissa from serving as trustee or beneficiary in any capacity. All joint accounts were to be dissolved, with funds returned to my mother's sole control. A full forensic audit was ordered to track and recover every missing dollar. Additionally," Judge Harriman concluded, "I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to elder financial abuse and fraud." Marissa didn't look at me as she left the courtroom. I didn't watch her go. Instead, I turned to my mother. who squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Your father would be proud," she whispered. 1 week later, I moved my mother into the guest house on our property, a small cottage my father had built years ago as his workshop. I hired a full-time nurse to help with her care, using funds recovered from Marissa's spending sprees. The divorce papers were filed the day after the hearing. Marissa didn't contest them. I learned later that she'd left Kentucky, heading for Colorado where her sister lived. The apartment in Louisville was abandoned, the lease forfeited. She'd taken only what she could carry in 2 suitcases. Sometimes in the evenings, I still sit on the back porch, watching the oak trees sway in the Kentucky breeze. The land remains in the family name, just as my father wanted. The trust is secure, with my younger cousin Jason, who recently passed the bar exam, serving as co-trustee alongside me. I don't spend much time thinking about Marissa anymore. Some betrayals cut too deep for anger to sustain. Instead, I focus on the good things. Morning coffee with my mother, weekend visits from old army friends, the simple peace of knowing that what was almost lost has been preserved. My father used to say that a man's character isn't revealed by how loudly he fights, but by how wisely. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, I finally understand what he meant.